doing?
Hey.
Oh, headphones.
There she is. Oh, headphones. Yeah, and then Danny, if you want to, so I think the next box along. Well.
Hi, Lottie. How you doing?
Hi, yeah, good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good. We are okay. We've had an eventful day.
Yeah, still
We've
good.
had a few technical issues, but we're back online.
That's good. How are you all feeling?
I think we're doing good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah.
That's good. That's what you need.
We're just we're trying not to focus on how long we've got left and just focusing on how far we've came.
It's hard. I've just moved seats, Lottie. So I was sat where Ben was sat before. Now I'm sat at the front of the room. And now I can see at the back of the room behind us, like the light coming in from the windows. So now I've got a true sense of like the sun is setting, whereas before I had no idea. It just really hit me like a brick wall how long we've got left.
Yeah.
But thanks for joining us, Lottie. Really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's really great.
How's your day been so far?
Yeah, it's been good. I'm in my second year at uni now, so I've got a bit of last minute deadlines that I have to do and stuff like that. So I've kind of just been working, being a uni student.
Where are you at uni?
I'm at Newcastle.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah, love it.
Northumbria or Newcastle uni?
Newcastle uni. Yeah. So I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Nice. So, Lottie, for those listening, give us a bit of background. Tell us about yourself, your journey a little bit. I'd like to know a little bit more as well, and then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, amazing. So I have struggled with my mental health. It's kind of no secret. I'm very open about it. And after kind of going through my journey, coming out the other side of it and kind of being in remission from therapy, I was looking back on everything that kind of went on during that time. And I realized that there were things that weren't being done, and there were perhaps pathways which could have led me to getting help quicker. And it kind of made me realize that if I went through that, how many other people are going through that, and how many young people are struggling and don't reach out to help. And I realized that my school, although they were doing certain things, weren't doing enough, and there were so many people that were struggling that they had no idea about. So I decided to kind of be that person for people in my school at the time. So I gave a talk, and then I proposed that I would do 24-hour dance-a-thon for Mind charity, which I participated in throughout the whole 24 hours. It was amazing, like the most memorable time that I've had. And yeah, we raised over £3,000 for Mind charity, which was incredible. And it just, the support I received and the amount of young people that actually messaged me after and being like, this has helped me, want to get help for myself, and how did you take those first steps? And I realized that as a young person, if I'm talking about it, it kind of impacts other young people to want to do something about it and get help for it. And so that's kind of where it all just kickstarted, really. I decided to do workshops at different schools, talking to young people, and just really getting mental health to be at the forefront of schools' policies, and the way they help young people, and having support systems in place for young people. And obviously with the pandemic, I was kind of backtracked a little bit, but I've set up an online Instagram page where I do a little series called Tea and Me, where I talk to young people, older people, about their mental health journeys, and just kind of raise awareness for the multitudes of conditions, and also the multiple ways that mental health can impact someone, and how different stories, you can have the same diagnosis but a completely different story to the next person. It's just about really making it an open conversation, because I believe personally, if I had a 20-year-old talking to me when I was 13 or older, I believe that I would have gotten help sooner, because I would have known what to do, and I would have seen, hey, there's this person that I can relate to who is saying that it's okay to go get help if you are feeling like this. And I just kind of want to be that person for young people, and that's what I continue to kind of do. I use my journey as like not a negative experience, but find a positive within it and use that to keep going. Yeah. So that's me.
Well done. Brilliant. I love that. And Lottie, I think a lot of, sorry, I need to move this mic. A lot of today, we've spoken about mental health, and we've kind of spoken about mental health a little bit theoretically, and using examples of other people. But because you're here, I'd love to go into your story in a little bit more depth, if that's okay with you, in case anyone's listening.
Yeah.
So when did you discover that, or really start to understand that you were struggling mentally, and then actually be able to identify it as such? And what was that whole sort of journey like for you?
So, although I don't recognize it as the beginning of my mental health journey, when I was 13, I picked up a habit of self-harming. And for me, I don't really know, I couldn't pinpoint how it started, but it did. And, you know, I kind of thought it was a phase, so I just kind of shoved it to the back of my mind. And then it wasn't until I was 14, I'd say, so second year of secondary school, that I just really lost all motivation to do things that I previously loved. And I found myself comparing myself to a lot of other people my age, and comparing the way I look and like the way I feel, or whether I'm popular enough. And I was just always kind of, in my mind, media would just say, oh, it's puberty. All girls go through this. All girls go through comparing their bodies to another person. And like, I was just like, okay, then this will go, this will pass. It didn't. And the kind of negative thoughts persisted and persisted. And I got to the point where all my energy was being taken up from trying to hide the fact that I was struggling, and put forward this front that I was okay to everyone else. So I have a journal at that time, and I would just kind of write everything down, but I wouldn't talk about it. It would just be written down, and then I'd shove it to the side, and I'd go about the next day putting this positive person forward. And it only kind of really hit me that I was ill when I was in my GCSE year. It got to the point where a binge bulimia eating disorder had developed over the summer, and my negative thoughts were just, yeah, horrible, really horrible, and captivating, and whatever I thought I believed. And when it got to the GCSE year, I couldn't cope anymore. I had given up. I was self-harming again. I was just in such a negative pattern, and I didn't want to get better, because all I wanted was to put forward the person of that I used to be. And sadly, I think, you know, although I knew that something wasn't right, I didn't think it was like mental illness. I just thought it was my journey of growing up. And I think the defining moment where I realized that I was ill was when I sadly attempted to take my life in the October. And shockingly for my mum as well, that was when she first kind of got the message that I really was struggling. And it's just sad that it had to get to that point, that I couldn't get the energy to, you know, reach out. But that's sadly the same story as a lot of other young people. So that night we went to hospital, and I got seen by a CAMS, that like nurse, where they basically have a criteria and measure you against that. And if you don't meet certain points of criteria, they just send you home, and that's it. And like, I remember one of the nurses saying to me, I've seen self-harm scars like worse than that. And she said, if you actually wanted to kill yourself, you probably would have.
Wow.
Yeah. So being ill, I sat there and I was like, right, so this is what I have to do. So I'm going to prove you wrong. Although that's not the way it should be. That is the way my brain worked. She just dismissed me. And I was like, well, I'm going to prove to you that I am ill, because this is what's happened. And so I just like spiraled, basically. And yeah, I went to see my school psychiatrist. He helped a little bit, but the medication that he put me on wasn't quite right. And the thing is, like, when you get put on medications, is that the first one that you get put on, probably not the right one. You have to go through trials and things like that with different ones. So I just got to the point where I was like, right, I've made a step to get help, and the school doesn't really like care that much at this point in time. And so I had just continued to spiral. And sadly, in the February, I attempted to take my life again, a little bit more seriously. So I was put into hospital, and then I was discharged about a week later. And then I had to wait for a bed at an inpatient unit, where I kind of was there for about 3 weeks to a month, just focusing on group therapy with myself, getting put on the right medications for what I was going through. And that was the first time I kind of realized how bad it had got and how easy it was to talk about it when you actually make the right step to get help and see the right therapist for you, and how much that can change your perception of mental health. So, you know, you can go see a therapist, I learned, and it could be the wrong person for you. And in my mind, I thought, well, if that therapist doesn't work, none of therapy is going to work. But what I've learned is, you know, through being in an inpatient unit, there is a right therapist for you, and that's what's going to like kickstart your journey into really getting better. So after my hospital admission, I was sent to a CAMS therapist, and I worked with her for about 18 months, focusing on the eating disorder side of it, self-harm, because it is an addiction. And you know, I've only been 2 years clean and I'm 20. That's like a 5-6 year battle with it, and she's really helped me through those 18 months to kind of process everything that I've been through. I think with my journey especially, it all happened really suddenly and really quickly, and the spiral was just so quick. And I think that's what shocked, you know, my friends, my family, because obviously I wasn't really showing the signs of it. But yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of talk about, because I couldn't pinpoint a moment that caused it. And I think that's what I find kind of hard to understand, is that, you know, I wasn't bullied. There were no exterior motivations like to have caused this. It was just basically a buildup of so much stuff going on that I just hadn't broken down. But yeah, that's kind of my journey. It's a bit dark. Yeah, I mean,
it's absolutely not, Lottie. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for that. I know you've said that you're so open about it, which is amazing, but I will always say thank you, because every time you tell that story, it's going to help someone. So thank you for what follows from that. And I think there were so many things that when you were discussing there, although I was intently listening, I was just like, I wonder what that must have been like. But one of the things, to take it back to a little bit earlier on in that story, was when you said, I hadn't been able to reach out. So there was something preventing you. Looking back on that now, what were those things? And I don't want this to turn this into some sort of slamming session against the support that you were given, right? We're not going to do that.
Or lack of.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It started already. But then in the state of mind that you were in, when you didn't get that support, did that confirm your beliefs that there was either something wrong or that people didn't care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go straight to that point. Yeah, absolutely. It made me feel like I was over exaggerating everything. And back to my point of why I didn't want to get help in the first place, was because I thought it was because I was going through puberty and that I was a girl, and that those comments reinforce that, is that I'm just over exaggerating. I'm not actually ill. Like, this is just a part of life, and that, you know, I'll just get over it. And it felt like there was just such a lack of support from like the medical side of it. I know that's changed now. I know there is a lot more awareness now. But for me, during that time, mental health wasn't a big topical conversation. You had odd activists here and there, but it was not the way it is now. It's like mental health now is just at the forefront and everyone's talking about it, and that's what makes it so good. But when I was going through it, it was 2016, 2017, like it was not very big. And I think that's kind of was one of the reasons, like one of the boundaries that kind of didn't make me want to get help, is that I didn't know if this was real or not, or what it was, and how I can get help for it and what was available to me. And like a lot of young girls do struggle at that age, and that was also another thing that I was thinking about, because when you're in prep school, you are taught about puberty and the way girls have like like really vast changing emotions, and that it's all going to change, and like that's what you're taught when you have like PSHE lessons. You're not taught about this other side of mental health, that actually if you feel sad persistently, this is what you can do to get help about it. You're not taught that at that age. And so I think ingrained in my mind was just, it's puberty, it's fine, I'm just growing up. And all of those little things kind of subconsciously made me feel like there was nothing that anyone could really do. And obviously my friends were so supportive, but at the same time had no idea what to say or do, because although they felt sadness, although they felt these emotions, to the extent that I was self-harming and I couldn't understand them, and it was just so much going on in my brain, they also didn't know what to say or what they could say. And so if I can't talk to my family because I'm too scared to, if I can't talk to my friends because they just can't help me, and if the world is telling me that mental health isn't really that big of a deal, and if this CAMS person is telling me that, I'm not ill enough to get help, what's the point? And I think that's where my mind was. It's just like, what is the point? Like, how am I going to get anywhere? It's like everyone talks about the light at the end of the tunnel. It was at the point where I was so stuck in the middle of the tunnel that I couldn't see the light from either of the ends. And how I got in there, I didn't know. And how I was going to get out, I also didn't know. And it was just stuck in this really like dark, horrible time. And yeah, it's nothing like people told me not to go get help. It wasn't anything like that. I think it was just a culmination of loads of different influences in my life. And, that's why I go to prep schools now, especially, people say, oh, why are you speaking to year 7 and 8s? Like, they don't understand. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, after my talks, there were 13-year-old girls coming up to me and asking how they asked their parents, like, to go get therapy and like for them. And how do you tell your parents that you're really struggling? There are some girls at 13 self-harming like I did. And it is so vital that we need to start looking at implementing mental health into schools and education at that young age, although people may think that that's really bad and you're exposing them to this. And it's like, no, because you're teaching about puberty and emotions, you should be able to teach about emotions that sustain over a long period of time that can cause mental health issues, and talking about it is so vital. It's as simple as that. And I think as you grow up, if talking about it is like at the forefront of when you talk about mental health for young people, if they experience mental health issues, the first thing they think of is, I should talk about this, instead of, oh my God, I feel so alone. And that's really what I believe can change, young people's lives from having to go through what I went through. Because I wouldn't really wish that upon anyone.
Yeah, and I think it's just the journey you've been on is incredible, and I'd love to come back and touch on what you think needs to change, especially within schools, in just a minute. But I'd like to draw you back a wee bit into your timeline of things and really ask you, what was your turning point where you decided, I'm going to start campaigning to raise more awareness of mental health. I want to improve people's understanding, and I don't want any other young girl to go through what I went through. What was that turning point for you? What was the first thing that you did to take that step in that journey?
Yeah, I think the turning point for me was after I'd just been told I was in remission. So that's like, you're recovered pretty much. And I had just been discharged from my last ever therapy session of that 18 months. And I came out of that appointment and I just sobbed from like relief, from happiness. And then all through that car journey, I was just thinking about this whole period of my life that has fundamentally changed me as a person, and who I am. And really just reflecting on that, and the people that I met while I was in the psych unit, the people that I met on this journey, people that I saw in the waiting rooms of therapy appointments, and just thinking about how many young people are having to go through exactly what I went through. And some people sadly don't, their suicide attempts work, sadly. And just thinking that that could have been me, I could have been part of that statistic. And I think that really scared me, because here I was on the other side, so happy and so relieved that I found the strength to get through it. But then thinking about how easily that couldn't have been me. And it just made me think there has to be something that I can do. I'm always like a firm believer that, you don't go through life and have all these negative, horrible situations without learning something from them. And I kind of sat myself down and I said, well, what have I learned from this? I haven't been through this negative time to not find something positive out of it. And that positive thing for me was making sure that no young person feels as alone and as scared as I did when I first kind of was faced with mental illness. And that was the real driver for me. The driver for me has always been, I'm not sharing my story for sympathy. I don't want sympathy. That's not what it is. I just want to make sure that someone knows that I'm on their side, and I know exactly what that person is going through, and I know exactly how hard it is to take that first step. But for me, I just want to be the driver of taking that first step is equal to taking 100 steps forward from where you were. So even if you take steps backwards, you're still 99 steps ahead of where you were. And that's really important to me. And yeah, it's just about driving home that talk to someone. It could even be yourself in the mirror. Talking about it and articulating your emotions is so vital. And that's what I wanted to do. So I thought about ways that I could kind of bring this all to light at my school. And I love dance at school. I did dance all the way through my whole life. And it's been, sadly something I lost when I was really ill and I stopped doing it. But I kind of picked it back up again. And it was like one of my favorite things to do. And I thought, well, what can I do with that? How can I raise money? How can I kind of make a statement within my school that this is something that it should be so important? And so I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do 24-hour dance-thon. And I'm just going to try and get as many people to be involved as possible. And to announce it, I'm going to share a bit of my story to the school, because I'm just a face in this school that I walk past people and kind of people assume nothing of. But if you stop to after the talk, I thought, well, if I walk around school and someone knows that I struggled and it's okay that I've struggled and I've gotten help for it, that, oh my God, I know her. So if she's gone through that and she's gone through that journey, I can also do the same thing, and it's not going to be weird. No one looks at her differently. So yeah, the talk went really well. I had some boys message me, asking how I made that first step and who I spoke to, and if I could help them out, which I was really grateful for, because boys, especially, their mental health is something that's quite dangerous. Men under 45, that's the single biggest killer suicide is. For men under 45. So yeah, that was really important for me. And then the dance-thon, just 9 o'clock, from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, the last hour, was, I've never seen our school kind of gel together in quite such an incredible way. Singing YMCA, We're the Champions, the room was just buzzing, and people were all there for the cause of mental health, that mental health should be as important as it is in this hour and moving forward. And so from there, I was just like, if this is the impact that it's created in my school, how many other schools can these kind of talks give? And that's where I kind of just reached out to schools and further tried to make change and provide workshops and stuff, which have gone really well. But yeah, that dance-thon, it was the pivotal moment where I realized that this was the kind of thing that I've learned from my journey. This is the positive outlook that I can have from my journey, is to help young people to know that it's okay to talk and it's okay to not be okay. Yeah, so the dance-thon, yeah, it was incredible. I had so much fun.
I think it's incredible that it was, obviously it would have been at your own school first, but just how, again, it was maybe that environment that you felt isolated, or that people maybe didn't understand, or people didn't know because they didn't know because you hadn't spoken about it before. But then for them to come together and not just accept it, because of course they should accept it, but embrace it and celebrate it. It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. And then no wonder that was in that pivotal point for you and that turning point. You've touched a little bit on the initial reaction and the response, and you had some people starting to open up and speak to you. Do you feel as if that was then the catalyst? Then did more people start to open up to you after that? What was then the dynamic at school like? Did anything else change when it comes to then people feel more comfortable speaking to one another, when it comes to even the teachers? What happened kind of within the school environment next?
So within the school, I then kind of got into relations with the head of pastoral care, and she kind of sat me down and she was like, right, there are obviously things that we did wrong during your journey. What were they? Tell me what they were. I want to know. No matter how much you slate us off, I just want to know. And so I said, I was like, we had like school counselors, and I just said, the school counselors should really engage with the pupils. They should be out in front of like the school. They were in like this little center hut thing, like hidden away. And I'm like, why can't they just, be in like the cafeteria and ask people, how are you doing? Like, so people know who they are and like see a friendly face. And yeah, I think just getting her to realize that talking about ways that young people can look after themselves, like self-care, going to talk to someone, and just finding the spaces within that school environment where young people can walk into an office and know that they can talk about anything and not feel ashamed to talk about it, was really vital. And so me and her kind of put together a mental health day, and then that turned into kind of like a big event. But it was a day basically to have loads of speakers in and just make this school community come together for one cause, and realize that everyone has mental health, and if you don't look after your mental health, that can then alternatively change into a mental illness. And that's vital in recognizing that when you are really having poor mental health for a long period of time, that it can kind of make things a lot worse and become a diagnosed condition. And so that whole day of just having speakers talking about this one topic, people's kind of getting involved with interactive sessions and really having a sense of like community, was amazing. And from there, I think the school kind of realized that this is something that's really important. The amount of young people that kind of went to get counselling afterwards was incredible. They had wait lists for counsellors now, whether before you could kind of get up any old appointment, but they had a wait list. And like, I think people started to realize that, oh my gosh, I should be getting help for this. And it just kind of created this buzz around mental health and how important it is for young people. And yeah, the school definitely did turn around and hold their hands up and go, okay, yeah, maybe we didn't understand then, but my God, we are trying to understand now. And I think for young people as well, that's so important that the school can recognize how important mental health is. And I think like, yeah, the school community was great, especially towards me, that like no one treated me differently, which was so nice, because I've shared my experience, but it's not for sympathy. It's just to help. I think of myself. It's to help the young Lottie that couldn't get help. So even if I help one person in that audience, that means the world to me. And it was nice just to have people go, well done, but I'm not going to treat you differently, because you are who you are now, and you aren't just the mental person that suffered from mental health. You are Lottie. You are so much more than that. And that was nice as well, to not have to face stigma within my own school. And so that kind of makes me believe that, there shouldn't be stigmas within school, hopefully, if you have the right people around you, surrounding you. Yeah.
And right at the end, I'm glad that you said what sort of support would the younger Lottie would have appreciated or needed, because that was literally what I was going to get onto. Now, look, obviously the obvious things when I say what could have helped you would have been things like what you're going and doing now, right? That education in order to have this earlier intervention. Now, this might be a difficult question because we can never know what impact it would have had on you. But if you could think of anything that you would have wanted to be told during, let's say, maybe the pre-phase before things started to, you know, get quite bad for you, and then maybe during it as well, is there anything that you would have liked to been told now looking back, or think that you could have been told that could have helped? Anything that you wish you'd known sooner?
Probably that if you don't have a good relationship with your therapist, it is okay to find a new one, and you don't have to stick around just because you feel bad if you leave that person. I think my first counsellor, she listened, which was great, but it was kind of like speaking to a brick wall, in that you talk and it's just echoed back at you, and there's no discussion in how you can move forward and get help and what are the next steps. It was just kind of, thank you so much for sharing, have a nice day, and that was kind of it, instead of, okay, great, so here's what you can do with these emotions and maybe try to implement this into your life. Yeah, I think that would have helped me kind of realize that, oh, maybe this therapy isn't working for me, so I should probably seek out a new one who can collaborate with me and make ideas together, and how I can kind of look after myself a bit more. I think that would have been really beneficial to me. But then again, who knows whether I would have, even if I could change therapists, who knows whether I would have. But yeah, I think it is really vital that people now know that it is okay, if you're not happy with the treatment that you're getting, to seek other ways of getting treatment. Yeah.
How important is that relationship? Because we know the trust is absolutely vital when it comes to speaking to people about their mental health. But also I think something that's massively important, that sometimes, and again, absolutely not to slam conventional therapy, but something gets in the way, is what a massive thing that we need in order to be able to build that trust and open up, is relatability. However, because obviously a lot of therapists and counselors, like, their hands are tied, they can't tell maybe personal situations, and for many reasons that's a good thing. But also then there can sometimes be these barriers, can't there? And it can also be a very formal approach, which can put people off. What sort of things should individuals be looking for when they're reaching out for help?
I think first of all, it's about a sense of whether there's interactions with each other. Because as I said before, if you're sat just thinking that you're just talking the whole time and you're not receiving anything back, that's not a great way of like having active therapy. For me, I mean, that can work for some people, absolutely. But for me personally, I think the best way to determine whether that will be a good relationship and whether it will be someone you can move forward with is whether they listen, take it in, and then help you work out solutions. Because at the end of the day, they can't just solve your mental health for you. You have to be able to put in the work, and having solutions and finding productive ways that help you so that you can go away and then work on them alone, is really, really beneficial. Because they give you the tools, it's now up to you to use them. And I think, yeah, interactions and communication with one another, you know, if they say something that you think won't work for you, say it. And being able to be open and honest with one another and have this open dialect, I think, is really important. Because if they're not honest with you and you're not honest with them, it's not going to work ultimately. But yeah, just a really, interactive session, I think, really works. And, you know, sometimes I would go and I wouldn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. And because we had that interactive relationship, she would be like, okay, right, so I have an activity for us, and you don't have to talk, you can just write or you can draw. And I was like, that still got me working through my mental health, even though I didn't want to talk that day. The interactions that we had still really helped me.
And then how important is it to kind of remove this, I'm not saying remove the clinical approach, but maybe remove people's perception that it's a clinical approach? Because what you've just described there, some of the therapy that you've received, it's a very experimental process. It's not just you sitting speaking, it's both, it's combined, it's a joint venture. Is that, would you, is that right to say, would people potentially, obviously if they find that connection, be able to have that type of experience? It's nothing to be scared of. It's something that can be incredibly empowering and rewarding.
100%. Like with my therapist, the reason why it worked was because I almost considered her a friend. Although she was there like on a clinical basis, she had the training, all of that. I didn't feel like I was in a clinical setting and that I was being watched and analysed and kind of thought of as a patient. I was treated as a Lottie, as a human being who was just struggling at life at the moment. And yeah, I think that is just so important, is just having kind of taking away the clinical aspect of it. And you know, a lot of the time people think of mental health and mental illness especially and think, oh well, you'll be on meds for life. And it's like, just because you suffer from a mental illness and you're diagnosed with a condition doesn't necessarily mean you'll be put on medication. You might just need therapy, and therapy isn't like, it's like if you went to the doctor and you sprained an ankle, they wouldn't prescribe you with give you a cast or prescribe you with like certain medications and things like that. They might just say you need physiotherapy, and you'd take that easily. You'd be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. And when it comes to mental health and they say you need therapy, people are like, oh, I don't want to go to therapy, I don't want to see a doctor. And it's like, it's the exact same thing but for your brain. And I think that's what people get scared about when you talk about therapy, is like, well, I don't want to be diagnosed, like I don't want this, I don't want to be put on medication. And it's like, it's not about that. It's just finding someone who is like a friend but can help you find productive ways to look after your mental health. That's all it is. And it's nothing to kind of think, oh my god, I'm going to be put into a psychiatric unit, I don't want to go, I don't want to do it. It's up to you to decide how those sessions go, and you're fully in control of that. And it's not like you're going to be sat in a white room, white chairs, you know, and all of that. So I think
how do we break that? Oh, sorry, like carry on. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say, how do we help people break that barrier down? Because for a lot of people out there who might be struggling, therapy could be the very thing that gets them through and to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to go back to the phrase I used earlier. But they might see therapy as this massive thing. I don't want to be diagnosed with something. Therapy won't work for me. And it could be a lot of barriers to them getting the help that will actually really benefit them. How do we help redefine what it means to get therapy? Because some people out there could really benefit from it and they're just not getting it because of these barriers.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that would help is for people to not be afraid to admit that they go to therapy. I think that once you've been through therapy, you know the benefits of it. But there are a lot of people who are still afraid to admit that they have been. And I think that's one of the issues, is that, you know, I hands up, I say I've been to therapy. You know, there are people that have been to therapy who are celebrities, who are open about it, who don't, you know, necessarily experience mental illness, but they want to have like help with like the way they want their life to go, like their life path and their career path. And therapy isn't all about you're ill. It's just a conversation with someone that's trained to help your brain be productive in finding an outcome. And I think the more we echo that, the better it will be. Especially, you know, my thing is all about young people. If you ingrain it in that generation, then they'll teach the next generation and the next generation. It's all about, for me, focusing on the young people, because they have the power and the difference to change what comes next in history. And I think if the generation before me can also echo the same message to, you know, generations above or below, I think it just kind of ties it all in together. And if we're echoing the same message that doesn't get mixed up in translation, I think that's so vital, is finding a message that works for everyone. And, you know, not defining it as this clinical thing, is that therapy can help you with all aspects of life. You don't have to be mentally ill to have gone to therapy. And I think just echoing that and keep echoing that is like really vital. Just the same way we push home that talk about your mental health is the same thing. Therapy, you should echo like the same thing. It's like, talk about anything in therapy. That's all it should be. Talk about your mental health, talk about anything in therapy, and echoing those two phrases continuously, I think, will make a big difference.
Oh, it's so powerful what you just said there. I'm just like smiling as you're speaking because it's just really ringing true. I think unfortunately it's still a little bit stigmatized, therapy. There's this idea that if you're going to therapy, that ultimately something must be terribly wrong. And I
Yeah.
think reminding people, and like you said, importantly, young people as well, that we can use therapy as a tool to just sharpen our brains, make them a bit sharper. And we can just go to therapy, have a conversation, and that can help us make more productive decisions, which are better for us. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're mentally ill, something's terribly wrong. It could be that, but also it very well could not be. And I think reminding people, and more importantly, young people, that that is the case and that is the truth. And it's not this stigma that we're so used to hearing, I
Yeah.
think is a great message. So thanks for sharing that.
No worries. Yeah, stigma's it's a tough one because it takes a lot of people to kind of break them down slowly. But I think we are gathering big numbers of people who actually do want to make a change and properly do it. And I think as long as we have those people and we stay strong with those people, and we have a collective kind of identity and a message, I think eventually we will break down the stigmas. I mean, compared to however, I don't know how long it was when I was ill, how many years, but we've already made such huge progress in those short years. It just excites me to think about what we can do in the next few years, in breaking down the stigma. But it's a difficult one because it's so weird. You just never know where it's going to go or how quickly it's going to break down and what's going to be the catalyst for it. But I'm just glad that we are at a stage where we're finally talking about these issues and recognizing that they are happening. And we are kind of in an emergency crisis where people are sadly dying a lot from it. And yeah, it's just great that you guys have like kind of created another platform for people to speak openly and honestly, which is really good to kind of break down the barriers. Yeah.
We was chatting earlier about there's one thing talking about mental health and there's like understanding mental health, which is a completely separate topic. And I think what we're doing here with this platform is we're bringing awareness to the table and we're talking about mental health. And then some of the things you're sharing is just helping us understand it on a deeper level. And that's when change is going to happen.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share how do I show that? So I just click show. Yeah.
We've got
a comment from Fiona. We've had a lot of people talking in the comments on the chat. Fiona said something really, really powerful just then. We'd happily go along to a physiotherapist or a doctor. So why not group therapy or one-to-one counseling, etc.? It's so true, isn't it? It's so normal to go to the doctor with a broken arm, and the doctor says go to physio or whatever it might be, or a dodgy knee or something. But when it's to do with our brain and our mental health, it's this taboo. It's this stigma, isn't it?
It's mad. I say to young people, I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, I say to them, but if you were like had tonsillitis, right, what would you do? You would tell your mum that you're feeling unwell, and then you go to the doctor and they'd ask you loads of questions, they'd have a little look, they've had like an inspection, and then they give you some help for it. So they might prescribe antibiotics or say, for a week, take some painkillers, make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you're getting enough sleep. And you say, okay, thank you. I'll let you know if we have any more problems. But why is the same processes not done for mental health? Why do people stop as soon as they experience symptoms of it? And it's about kind of creating a message where everyone's on the same wavelength and thinking that mental health and physical health are the same thing, but just in different parts of your body. And the processes are exactly the same thing. You could go to a doctor and they might not say you need medication. They might just say you just need to rest and ice it. And you take it as a fact. So when someone says to you, you're struggling with your mental health, you either need to go and talk about it or really just work on self-care and looking after your body and your mind. Why do people not take that and be like, okay, yeah. And why is there a kind of taboo about it? Why? Yeah, my big thing is that we should aim to treat mental health just as equally as physical health. And it's so easy to do it when you have physical symptoms, but why is it so hard when you have mental health symptoms?
We've got some amazing comments of people showing you support as well. Out of interest, Lottie, can you see any comments, or is it only when we bring them up that you can see them?
Only when you bring them up, I think.
Annie, do you mind clicking on a couple? So yeah, so we're starting with, so we've got Teresa at the top as well. If you click, I think you should be able to go through them all. So we've got all right. So this, yeah. So Teresa said, my boy's 11 years old and overnight started with mental health issues, worrying constantly about not being good enough in school. Heartbreaking. Is this something that you are seeing a lot of? Because you're going into schools. You're going to be one of the first people who's going to be able to see all the different types of mental illness developing or poor mental health developing in school. You said a lot of your own came from confidence issues, body image issues, comparison issues, which then obviously those compounded. What sort of things are you seeing at the moment? And then do you have any advice for Teresa as well?
I say that within schools there are variable factors that kind of happen. A lot of people when they are in year 8 kind of get anxiety about moving on to secondary schools and kind of starting their whole adult life. And moving to a new place, there's a lot of anxiety around that. There's a lot of anxiety from girls about body issues still. Although social media plays a big role in it, there is, when you're at that age, a lot of comparison to other girls, because obviously bodies change at completely different rates when you're at age 13, and a lot of girls can't comprehend that. So that's an issue. And then, sometimes when people are doing badly at school and they don't understand why, and they're working really hard, but the grades just aren't coming in, there are a lot of factors which can kind of decrease mental health. But I think the important thing is teaching about emotions and varying emotions. I have, something like I do in my talks is I put up a thermometer of like hot to really cold, and the hot kind of section is known as negative emotions and struggling. And I say, if you're stuck within this hot circle for longer than a week, it's time that you start talking about what's going on in that hot circle so that you can come down to like a cooler kind of realm of emotions. And I think teaching young people, especially, I think it was Teresa, you said, I think just teaching them about emotions and the way that it can impact their day, and just giving support when he gets home to have a chat and be like, so how was your day? I mean, my mum used to ask me all the time and I'd be like, yeah, fine. But actually, how were you feeling in school today? And kind of teaching him that it's okay to be open with his emotions and be vulnerable with them and recognize that, oh, you know what, today was a really bad day. Because, whatever you get out, like emotion wise, like before you go to sleep, the better sleep you get, and the next day the more refreshed you feel because you got it off your chest and it's not just sitting in your brain and whirring away and constantly putting you down. If you get rid of it by speaking about it, it can really benefit, I feel. And that's kind of what I aim, especially when I talk to year 8s and stuff, is just starting those open, vulnerable conversations now. And that can really, really help. And I would say at home as well, starting those conversations about emotions and allowing them to be vulnerable about whatever they're going through in school, and just listening and really listening and intently listening, and just try as hard as you can to grapple the different influences that could be affecting someone at that age during school, especially. Yeah. So that's kind of my advice. Yeah.
Got an amazing comment there as well. Jamie, I said, what an amazing ambassador for mental health and for others. So incredibly courageous and inspiring. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, so we kind of touched on a little bit just then about how there's so many influences and so many factors that are affecting our, I guess, the emotional scale that you might be going through as a young female, especially. I think a massive barrier which is stopping young people talk about their mental health, and we've discussed this at length today already, is this gap between a potentially older person's perception of mental health and then the reality of what a young person might be going through. We still live in a generation where some people don't believe mental health exists, and yet people like yourself and many other people are going through what you've been through, and it's just incredible that there's still both people living in the same time frame. What kind of things are influencing those emotions, and how can we get the message across to people who maybe don't understand? Because it can be like a foreign language to some people I'm trying to be compassionate and empathetic to people like that, who they just weren't raised like that. There's people in my family who are like, mental health doesn't exist, and they're just from the Caribbean, who don't ever talk about emotions and feelings and stuff like that. So how can we get the message across to people like that who might not understand that these
Yeah.
facts exist and people are going through them?
Yeah, I mean, for my mum even, I think she didn't quite understand it until, I was at my breaking point, and I did attempt my life, and she just kind of said to me like, okay, you need to sit me down and tell me what is going on. And I just kind of, I tried to get through to her, but I think it took her some time to kind of really grapple with it. And yeah, she bought tons of books and did the reading so she could work out and understand me during that time. But yeah, I just say, if you are a parent and you have a young child, I'd say just educate yourself and read about it. There are so many resources and so many people talking about, different experiences, that the information is so easy to find. And I would say that, if you do have a young child, is just learn about it, so that if one day maybe your child is struggling, you understand it already, and you kind of have an idea of what might happen and how the journey might progress and what you might have to go through as a parent. I think is really important. Just reading and educating yourself is vital. And there are many factors which can kind of change someone's mental health, but I think the easiest thing to say is to generations who don't quite get it, or don't, it's like a foreign language to them, as you say. I think just explaining the fact that the easiest way to explain it is that we all have mental health. Mental health is feelings, it's emotions, as simple as that. It's like, you could ask someone, do you feel sad, do you feel happiness, and they'd be like, yeah, and you'd be like, that's mental health. What mental illness is the build-up of negative emotions, and negative thoughts and feelings. So like, you'd ask that person again, do you ever have days where you feel excessively tired or excessively sad? And they'd probably be like, yeah, I do. And you go, that's mental health. That's poor mental health. Mental illness is kind of the chemicals in your brain just aren't working properly, and they aren't balanced as much as, say, the other person's. And the persistence of negative emotions can lead to mental illness, which is where the chemicals in your brain aren't quite right. It's kind of just explaining it like that, so that person can first understand what mental health is, and that it's just feelings and emotions and excessive sadness or excessive tiredness or maybe excessive happiness. That's mental health as a whole. And then mental illness is the kind of more scientific side of it, and trying to explain that it can be a build-up of poor mental health for a long time, or it could be other influences, or it could be just a chemical imbalance within your brain. And just laying it out like that, I think, some people do begin to understand it and get it, especially when, you talk about the mental health side of it and how you can have poor mental health when there can be days when you're really sad or tired, and you can have good mental health on days that you're really happy. And really just putting it simply without going into too much detail is, I think, really important, and they can understand it a lot more. I do the same with teachers a lot because they don't quite understand it, and so explaining it like that, they're like, oh, so I can have bad mental health. And I was like, yeah, you can have bad mental health days that you're that you're ill necessarily. Yeah.
So we've got a couple of comments. One, Fiona's just said beautifully said, and I couldn't agree more. It's so refreshing to hear, because we have these conversations every single day, but the way that you speak about stuff, you break things down really, really well, and you make things, and it will be because of your work in schools and having to speak to teachers and kids, and maybe some people who aren't fully understanding of what mental health and what mental illness is. You're able to explain things and articulate things so well, which we absolutely love. But one thing that I'm curious to know about is if you have any insights into this. Of yes, of course, we can communicate this, or we can start to educate people on it. Are there any barriers that then actually getting the children to really understand it or take interest in it? Because a lot of the time when you've got younger kids, we have to speak to them in their terms, right? It has to interest them, or they have to be getting some rewards from it to even take an interest. So what do you do in that scenario? Because I bet some parents listening to this would be keen to understand that.
Yeah, so the way I kind of approach giving talks to prep school is to try and make it as interactive as possible, because I just remember kind of sitting down when I was like younger and just having someone just talk at you, and you're just sat there like, and it's just like, when they're not involved, they just zone out. And I think that's the most important thing, is keeping them involved. So the way I kind of start off my sessions is I ask them, what do you guys know about mental health? What do you think it is? And I kind of let them discuss in groups and then feed it back to me, and kind of create this room where it's an open dialogue between me and them. And I'm not kind of just blurting my story like, this is how bad mental health can be, like, this is so scary, like, I'm kind of taking them through first what emotions can be, what mental health can be, and asking them at the end, if you were struggling, what kind of self-care advice would you give yourself or your friends? And then start that dialect and kind of talk about ways that you can get help, and ways that you can talk to family members, and ways you can look after yourself. And I think really making that conversation interactive with each other and really open is really important. And kind of in the beginning, I give some ground rules, kind of just being like, there is no silly question. It's such a classic, isn't it? There is no such thing as a silly question. And then just saying that no matter what you want to say, no matter what questions you ask, it's okay to ask them, and just be inquisitive and learn, because that's ultimately what I'm there for. I'm there to help them learn about ways they can look after themselves by using my own experiences. But ultimately, it's to get them to be interactive and really involved with trying to figure out solutions, that if they were struggling, what would they do? And I think that's really vital, just keeping it really interactive and really engaged, instead of just blurting out like silly things. I don't know, but yeah, just blurting out and just talking at them instead of with them, I think can really, really change the game.
Yeah. I'm getting obviously you're so clearly passionate about this. And I would absolutely love to sit and like discuss this like for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think I can probably get from your passion, and maybe this is just me putting my own interpretation on, because this is what I'm like, there's a lot of frustrations, right, around other things. Now, what are some of the main things that frustrate you when it comes to misinterpretations and misinformation when it comes to mental health? So I'll kick us off, because I've literally been sitting thinking of like a couple of them.
Yeah.
One of them is that admitting we have had poor mental health or have poor mental health is some sort of mental fragility. So that's a big one. For me, another one is that it's a cop-out or an excuse. We've seen that a lot in the news, you know, with Piers Morgan, that type of thing. Yeah. And then another one, which I think this probably annoys me the most, because it's when people are then looking to improve their mental health. It's people then almost frown upon that sometimes and see it as like, I'll give you the best example. My neighbor came across the road because she'd been delivered one of our parcels. We weren't in, came to drop it off. And I was just chatting away to her. And I was like, how are you getting on? She was like, oh, I've been laid off from work. She's like, I've been made redundant. She was like, you know what, Dan? She was like, bastard. She was like, we literally just had like 2 weeks going on about mental health awareness and looking after each other, X, Y, and Z. And literally no warning, boom, that was it. No support, nothing, right? But then I was like, what sort of things did you do out of interest in the mental health awareness week? And I shit, you know, this is true. The work made them go out and go for a walk outside and hug trees. Now, one, not only is it, you know, absolutely absurd, but then that is not the people who think they're getting an education on mental health think they're going to think that's what mental health is. They're going to think that's what improving my mental health is, going out. And I think it was that link, which is then just going to confuse people even more, put people off even more, and then make it this ridiculous thing. What sort of misinformation or what's the other word that I'm thinking of?
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation are frustrate you?
Going on from hugging trees and going on a walk, you know, it's the same line as go take a bath, go put a face mask on and have a cup of tea. It's like, no, Sharon, I'm really dealing with my mental health here. I'm not dealing with that. Like, it's just like, it's one of those things where you know, self-care is great. Like, you do feel great after, but if you are struggling with what's going on up here, a face mask isn't going to do shit. Like, it's not going to help you. Yeah, there's so many frustrations with that. You know, self-care is about, you know, being inquisitive with your emotions. It's about understanding your emotions and the way they're going to fluctuate. And it's, you know, understanding, you know, that it is okay to sit in your bed and crying and letting it all out. That's self-care, because you're letting out what's going on up here. It's about journaling. It's about, you know, learning more about what you can do for yourself, and, you know, learning about what you're excited for in the future. And that is self-care as well. It's understanding yourself. You know, another thing that I went through when I was in school, you know, mental health wasn't a big thing, but it was the fact that I just didn't want to do my exams, or it was the fact that I just didn't really want to go to school and that I wanted to lie in. And that's the sad thing, you know, mental health days are really important. You know, if your child says to you, I just don't think I can cope with school today, and I really just need this day to work out how I'm feeling and what I'm doing, that is okay. And that's not a cop out. And that's not them saying, I'm too lazy to go to school. That is, mental health days can be so important. And I think teachers also need to recognize that sometimes if a child is quiet and just asks for a timeout and isn't as involved and active, maybe it's time you ask the question, hey, are you okay? Genuinely, instead of, oh, they probably just didn't get enough sleep last night because they're up on their phone. You know, instead of resulting to that, you know, actually think, maybe they are really struggling, maybe they are not doing okay. And thinking of it as that someone doesn't want to go to school or that someone doesn't want to go to work is just a bit shallow these days. It's just a bit, you've got to delve deeper, because people, you know, they miss these things, and then suddenly this person is really ill and maybe that person has died, and then they think, what could I have done? But maybe actually not questioning why they're not coming to a certain event, or, you know, probing them to like go out with you all the time. If they say no, you say, oh, that's unlike you, are you okay? Instead of, oh, you're just being boring, like da 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 da, and sugarcoating it. Yeah, I mean, there are so many frustrations I have. One thing is, you know, politically, government right now, mental health. Bloody hell.
That's very diplomatic of you, Lottie.
Yeah.
I love how you leaned over to the camera and whispered it. Bloody hell.
Yeah. It's just, I think the people who have the power to change policies and funding, I really believe that they need to start seeing the people behind the numbers. And, you know, the statistics that they bring out, I feel like we're all kind of brainwashed when we look at them. We're like, oh, we just see the number, but we don't actually realize that that's a human being, and that's a whole community of people that have tried to help that one person. That's their family, that's their friends, who are all affected. So it's not just that one single statistic, like person within that statistic. It's a whole community. And I think we've become desensitized to that, and that needs to change. And I think, you know, the people who have power to change and make the actual difference, I mean, we can do as much as we can, but ultimately we don't make those decisions. At the end of the day, we can push for change, we can push as hard as we can, but we don't make that decision at the end of the day. And I think the people that do make those decisions need to realize that there are so many people dying from self-inflicted actions and self-inflicted pain, and no one's doing anything to stop that. And I just think it's got to the point where we are in a pandemic of its own. We are in a coronavirus that has been lasting 4 years, and it's only getting worse. And I think it frustrates me a lot, and I love talking about it, and I'm so passionate, but it's frustrating because I don't have the power to make those decisions, and I have to leave it up to someone else. And there's only so much that we can do as a community talking about mental health, and that's what annoys me. And you know, they can say that they care about mental health, you can say all you want, but actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. And that's why I just get so frustrated, because I hate going to schools and having 13-year-old girls and boys come up to me and say that they hate their body and that they're self-harming and that they're not enjoying their childhood at 13 years old. Like, it's horrible. They come up to me and they're crying and they're really desperate, and it's so sad that at that age you're not out playing football with your friends, you're not enjoying your life at that age, and that there is this whole demon that is coming out of you at that age. And that just makes me sad. And, you know, that's what keeps me going ultimately, but it also makes me so frustrated.
Yeah, I think the things that we feel the same frustrations as well, but I don't want you to ever feel frustrated, because what I know you said that sometimes it can feel a bit helpless and sometimes our hands are tied, but it just takes people like you to continue to spread this word. And the more that we shout about it and the louder we shout, we will be heard, and I know we will eventually. And it is just needing to get this education out there until more people understand it. When it comes to your mental health now, you're very open and honest that this is just a continuous journey.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you do to keep on top of your mental health now? But also, what sort of things do you do to identify if you're maybe struggling a little bit? Because from us working in this field for a very long time, obviously from myself, it's from an exercise standpoint. One of the main things that I need to educate people about is, like, you need to prepare for the shit days. Like, you can't think that just because you're on the road to recovery that then there's no looking back. So I think that's what happens to a lot of people. A lot of people start to make progress and they think that progress is then linear. They think that then they're just going to continue to go up, and then they think, oh, I have relapsed, or oh, I'm back to where I was, when they have one or two bad days or experience these emotions that everyone experiences. So is that part of your process, obviously having this awareness and being able to maybe prepare for things in advance, identify things that are maybe coming in advance, preempt things? And what other things do you do now to protect your mental health?
Yeah, so as you said, progress isn't linear. And, you know, although I finished therapy a while ago, I'm only still 2 years self-harm free. And so obviously I've had relapses and I've gone back steps, but, you know, for me, I have to keep reminding myself of how far I've come, and that one step backwards does not mean I'm back at square one. It just means there's been a bit of a hiccup, and I have to remind myself that that's okay, and I can allow myself that time to just heal from that and not feel guilty about having bad days. You know, for me, I take medications every day for my mental health. That's just the way my journey has been. So that kind of helps me keep on a good track. But therapy has really helped me by giving me the tools to help me out when I am having those bad days. I already have them ingrained in my brain, so I kind of know what I need to do. But I have a list that I write out in my journal every month of things that I can do that help me. And I just remind myself every month of what they are, so that if I do have a bad day, all I know is that I go to my journal and there's a list of things that I just tick off that I know that I can do that will help me get through what I'm getting through. But also, like, even if they don't work, that's okay. Like, even if I ignore completely what I'm meant to do and the tools that I given myself, and I just sit and I watch a movie, that's okay. And that's the way I've dealt with it that day. And I think the biggest thing for me is not making myself feel guilty for not feeling good all the time. You know, I put forward kind of like the recovery process, and that, you know, I've had a great progress, like I've progressed through it and I'm doing really well now. Like, yeah, I'm doing really well, but doesn't mean I don't have really bad days, and it doesn't mean that I don't struggle like any other person. Like recently I was in like a bit of a rut, and I just wasn't looking after myself as I should be, and I kind of lost like all my routine. And it took me a while to realize that, you know, hey, I've been kind of slacking on my daily routine and I should probably get back into that. But instead of getting angry about it, I just kind of forgave myself and I said, yeah, you know what, that happened. And like, you don't have to be perfect all the time. You don't, just because you talk about mental health doesn't mean yours has to be amazing. So I think forgiveness for yourself is one of like the most important things that I do personally. To kind of help me not get wrapped up in my head that I'm failing and that, you know, things are going wrong. So yeah, forgiveness is one of the big things. And then I usually can tell when things aren't going great when I sleep in till about 2 p.m. and then I've lost half the day, and then I realize, oh, okay, this isn't going the way I want this to go. So that's usually like my first warning sign, when I'm just sleeping all the time and I'm not getting out and like seeing the day through. So at uni, you know, although there are some days where can't get out of bed because I'm a bit tired. They're like, it's okay to have those days, and be hungover and feel like crap and like just sit with your friends, like that's fine. That's not a waste of the day because it's fair enough. So it's allowing yourself kind of that balance between knowing when things are going down the wrong way, when it's consistent, and knowing when it's just days that, yeah, okay, you are a bit tired, that's fine. But yeah, I think just knowing yourself is really important, and definitely writing down things that help you and just keeping them ticking over in your brain as a toolbox, and using that toolbox when you need to and dipping in and out of it. I think that's one of the benefits of therapy as well, is it teaches you loads of new tools. So you have a collection of different things that you can pick up and choose, which has been really helpful for me. So yeah, I think that's kind of, I mean, yeah, my mental health isn't amazing all the time, but that's okay. And I can happily stand up here and say, yeah, I do have really shit days, but I forgive myself for them because everyone does. And like, as long as I can recognize that and move forward, then that's where I am. That's where I need to be.
That's such a powerful message.
Sorry, you
Yeah.
were finished.
I was just going to say, it's
yeah.
such a powerful message and a good way to end that kind of that bit of chat. It was like, you know, I can understand how someone in your position who goes into schools and helps educate young people feels almost obliged to live at a certain standard, where my mental health has to be at this certain standard 24/7. And if it ever drops below that bar, that's when guilt creeps in and imposter syndrome potentially. But it's just completely unrealistic. You're still a human being living a human experience, and that comes by default with a fluctuation of emotions and that emotional spectrum, which does have peaks and it does have troughs. And I think the fact that you can recognize that and then just speak openly about it is so powerful. And that's actually the best message you can send the kids that you're working with. Just kind of touching on the children that you're working with in schools and stuff like that, I wanted to, because one of Teresa's comments triggered a question that I wanted to ask you, and I'll just put it on so you can see it there. She said, in reference to her young boy, it's had a huge impact on his emotional well-being due to pain throughout his body. So actually experiencing physical symptoms now. Young people don't understand how to express their emotions when school do not provide these tools. Education is a starting point, not only about maths and English, which, as we know, is it's stressed massively important in schools, how, you know, English and maths are going to get you through life. But if you haven't got a good mental health, then you can't get very far anywhere. But the point Teresa rose was about how not being able to express their emotions. That's what sparked a question from myself. And I recently became an uncle for not the first time, so no need to congratulate me, but I became an uncle again. And my sister was telling me about the importance of allowing her children the ability to express their emotions through tantrums, because they can't speak yet, they're so young. But often when young babies have tantrums and they're screaming and they're shouting, it's because they're just trying to express how they're feeling. They just haven't got the vocabulary yet. And it's, I imagine, very similar in schools. Yes, maybe children can speak, but maybe not to a level where they can completely, maybe coherently verbalize what's going on through their head. And I wanted to ask you, is that something you've noticed working with young kids, is that they have these complex emotions going on, but sometimes frustration creeps in when they can't find the words to describe what's going on, if that makes sense? And if you do see that, how do you help kids get those words?
Yeah, so there are some boys that kind of, they present with what teachers call, oh, he's got anger issues, but actually you talk to him and you realize there are things that he is frustrated about, but he doesn't know how to say it. And that's why he turns to anger, because that's the way that he knows to get it out. And one thing that I think is really vital is that children can express things without using words very well. You know, like one of the things that I sometimes do is do coloring with them and drawing with them. And sometimes, you know, I say, express how you're feeling right now by drawing, and them looking at it, they can discuss how they're feeling using the drawing, being like, well, I chose this color because this represents, you know, this emotion, and this is how I'm feeling right now. And then this color represents the mix of this emotion and this emotion. And they can visually kind of get it out instead of using words. It's through the color and it's through the drawing. And sometimes, you know, I ask people, you know, if you had to describe a song that kind of reflects how you're feeling right now, what song is it? And then, you know, listening to that song and then kind of picking out words. And that's how you can kind of understand. There are so many ways that you can understand a young person other than them verbally telling you. And I think that's really important that schools kind of, you know, learn these tools and like have these options available for kids. But I mean, that's in the future, hopefully that will happen. But it's about kind of taking those steps that there and accepting that there can be alternative ways that some people express their emotions, and that's totally fine. But just allowing them to have that toolbox to be able to do it is really vital.
I'm just thinking out loud now. Do you think that's potentially where this stereotype of young boys being aggressive has come from? Is it just not being able to express how they're feeling, and that leads to frustration, and then that leads to potentially aggressive behavior, but not because they're actually just inherently aggressive kids. It's just because they've got all these feelings going on and just don't know how to say it, don't know how to get it out of the system.
Yeah, it's like with girls, and when they're growing up, you know, we get this whole range of emotions, and we I mean, tend to be quite good at articulating our emotions. We're quite in touch with them. But for boys, I think they also go through these changes and they also experience these emotions, but I don't think they, you know, as a stereotype, as a boy, you're kind of brought up into this manly man world, and that you should be like dominant and this and that, and like emotions aren't really talked about that much for that age specifically. And I think that's what frustrates them, is that they're feeling all these things, but typically in a society, you're not really, as a boy, it's kind of sugar coated, and like it's not really the manly thing to do. Like you see that when you watch movies or look at social media, for example, like that's what they see. A man doesn't cry in a movie, and so that's what it's depicted for them, is that they have so many emotions going on, they're changing so much, but the only way that he can get it out is through physically getting it out. And yeah, I think the build-up of emotions and not being able to say them or express them builds up into frustration that there's nothing they can really do. And, you know, I think that, you know, when kids are like, teachers say that, oh, he's got anger issues, like he just gets so angry. It's like, no, ask him what's going on, because there'll be a reason for it. And you just have to be open enough to understand his reasons. But yeah, it's really nice when you see boys start to realize that it's okay to talk, especially in that age group. Like when one came up to me after a talk, I was just really happy that he felt like I'm a stranger, but that he could talk to me about it and begin to express how he's feeling, which is really good. And that's what I like to see.
What would you say to Teresa's young lad? Because she's just commented again saying, I'll just put on there, just saying yes. What would you say in response? Because obviously her lad's going through potentially some of the things we've been discussing. Do you have any tips or advice for him and lads just like him who maybe do have trouble just articulating what's going on? I love the example you said about tell me how you feel in a song, or draw a picture of how you're feeling. Are these things that you've been using for a while, and how successful are they when you do use them?
For me, and what I've seen with kids, pretty good. There are some people that just don't care. They're just so like, I don't really need to do this. And I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. Like, you probably don't really understand what mental health is. And that's totally fine at that age, because some people don't and some people do. But then you have some girls who really, really get involved. And there are some boys as a group as well. They're all sat there. And when I ask them to discuss questions, they're all talking together and really interested. And that makes me really, really happy. And the advice that I give is just, whenever you kind of get a breakthrough conversation, and kind of get into an open dialect, you know, asking how are you, and then no, really, like how are you feeling at the moment, and just probing like that. And I guess if they don't want to talk to you verbally, like try and take them out on a walk, or like go play football with them, and kind of get their head in a different place, and then maybe ask again. And just, I think, reminding that there is someone there if they want to get something out off their chest, and, you know, maybe making them join a new sport or something to kind of get them out and about and doing things, I think is really important as well, especially for boys, and kind of building friendships through sports so that they have like a kind of support network around them, is really important as well. But obviously, I mean, the hard thing is that I'm not a therapist, and that I don't specifically know what's going on. but all I can do is offer what I have taught young people in schools and offer that to you to maybe try as well. I'm not saying that these are 100% going to work, but I think just create an environment where that kind of thing can thrive and those conversations can thrive. And I think eventually they will happen.
But I could listen to you speaking all day. I really could. I've got a couple more questions if it's okay. And the reason that I want to ask these is we've touched on a couple points, and I think one, because you've raised them, but also because of the knowledge and experience you have, I think you would be the perfect person to give a little bit more context. And I think also from a safeguarding perspective, there should be a couple of things that we should mention. So the first thing that I would like to bring up is self-harm, which you've touched on throughout this and I was going to say interview, throughout this podcast. There's still such a lack of knowledge when it comes to this, and there's still such a perception of this as well. So I've got a gym, and a mental health and exercise gym, and I remember there was one day in my gym, because I had made it such a safe place for people to come and express themselves. That's literally what they're doing. They're coming in there, expressing themselves through exercise, improving their mental health through exercise. And there was 3 females in my gym, all wearing vests, and who all had scars on their arms, 3 of them. And they were in together and they were chatting, and all 3 of them basically said that's the first time in the gym that they've ever been able to wear a vest. And that, I think it was recently after, it was literally only a couple of weeks into opening my gym. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my God, like it was so powerful for me. It's like one of those moments I would just never forget. And it just meant so much to me, because it was through those 3 clients of mine that I began to start getting such more of an education on self-harm, because my perception of it in the past, growing up, I'll hold my hands up, was absolutely wrong. It was the total lack of education. And then like misconceptions, again, misinterpretation. Why do you feel that there's still a little bit, dare I say, fear from the general public when it comes to this? People a little bit scared of it and scared to talk about it. And could you just give a little bit more education on this when it comes to your own experience, just for anyone listening who still sees it as a topic that we shouldn't be allowed to talk about?
Yeah, self-harm is one of those things where, for me personally, I've faced a lot of stigma from it. When I was like, for example, this is just one of many. I was sat on a train once where it was summertime, it was hot, and yeah, I have scars all up my arms. And I was wearing a tank top because it was hot. What else was I going to wear? I'm not going to wear long sleeves. And I was sat on this train, and this mum, I was sat in a 4. And this mum and her 2 daughters, younger daughters, came along, and I kind of had the only 3 seats together on the carriage. They came and sat down, and I smiled at them, I think, trying to be nice. And the mum just stares at me for a really long time. So I just kind of look back at her, and she goes, "Right, girls, we're moving." And I was like, "What?" She was like, "You can't be around that." And I was just like, "Around what?" I was like, "I'm really sorry, but around what?" She was like, "Look at yourself." And then she just got up and moved. And I was like, I think the perception is that people think we're violent, or that we're going to do something to affect or put a negative effect on their children. Like we're walking around showing off that this is what you do when you're sad. And I think people get scared of just like, because they don't understand that your brain has led you to be doing this. I don't think they understand that. I mean, if I could take off my scars, I would. But I went through that, and I went through that journey, and that it happened, and it's not a consequence. It's just part of my story, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cause your children to self-harm. It doesn't mean that in the slightest, and I think that's the perception that people get wrong, is that we're going to be a negative influence on other people from showing them that that's a way that you coped. And I don't quite understand it, and I don't think I ever will. But the only way that I kind of got through it was just recognizing that that person's naive, and that I'm strong to be able to show my scars and accept that that was a part of my journey. And I think that anyone else who's watching this, who does face stigma, just shove 2 fingers up at them. I don't like, it's not worth your time at all. Like, their perception of you is not worth your time. You are never going to see that person again in your life. So just hold your head up high and enjoy wearing a tank top in the summer because it's hot and you're allowed to. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they can get in the bin. It just frustrates me so much.
We have a swear jar, but I'm going to say this. I don't care. Fuck yeah, that was brilliant. That was brilliant, Lottie. Thank you.
Yeah.
The last question that I want to ask. Sorry, I'm being reminded of being cautious of time, so I promise this is the last one that I will ask. A lot of people are going to be inspired by your journey, and I reckon a lot of people are going to be able to just take so much comfort in some of the things that you've said as well. If someone was starting to want out to potentially to better themselves in some way, or to reach out for support in some way, whether they think that they're going to go take up a new hobby, whether they decide they're going to go to therapy, whether they decide they're going to go to exercise, whether they just want to listen to this on repeat, whatever it may be, the start of that journey, kind of what I touched on before when I was talking about overcoming obstacles in advance. What advice would you give people on that, and what things could people potentially expect, bearing in mind that you're still very much on this journey? Because again, a lot of people think it's going to be turbulent the whole time. A lot of people think it's going to be smooth the whole time. What advice can you give to these people, and what can they expect?
Don't plan out how you think it's going to go. Start it and accept that there'll be an end point, but don't plan the in-between points. You know, you get from A to Z, but don't plan how quickly you're going to get to all the other letters, because you will be disappointed, because life happens, things change, things go up and down. So just stay in the present and work on each step as it comes, and don't force yourself to get better in a certain time frame, because it will probably put too much pressure on yourself and it will probably get worse. The unexpected is always going to happen. So don't, you've got to factor that in always, within that kind of A to Z gap is what I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. You got any questions that we'd held for Lottie?
Just one that I usually finish on is what's next for you, Lottie? And obviously you've mentioned you're slap bang in the middle of your exams at uni, but what's next for you? What are you gonna stick your teeth into next?
Don't know what I want to do job wise, but that's fine. Get through my degree, I'd say, is number one. But also on the side, I have a kind of Instagram page called Time to Talk. So keeping that up, keep talking to people about their mental health experiences and raising awareness, I think it's really worked and been really vital. And then just on the side, it's all on the side at the moment until I finish uni. And then after uni, just hopefully making this my job and my life and keep working for change is kind of the end dream. How I get there, as I said before, I don't know, but yeah, that's the end goal. But not putting too much pressure on myself to kind of fit that all in really quickly, and just let it kind of balance life, uni and campaigning all in one, and trying to keep that healthy balance right now is my priority. Yeah.
Well done, you.
I know, honestly, so inspiring. I know you said you're not 100% sure what the future holds, but I think from our standpoint, it is 100% this. It's this campaigning, it's this being this voice. I think for people who, like I said, we talk about this every single day when it comes to our award and what we teach. And yeah, having someone like Lottie in our corner is just, it's absolutely amazing. Honestly, like well done to you. You're an absolute inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you also for providing this platform. I love what you guys do as well. So I'm just really honoured to be given the time and the space by you guys. And I hope the 24 hours goes well. It's hard. Keep going.
It's tough. Yours was a lot more physical than ours was. We're just sat here talking. You were actually moving for 24 hours.
Would you recommend getting some dancing in?
Yeah, obviously. Put on some tunes. Just keep it going. Keep the vibes.
Oh, brilliant. So yeah, Lottie, you've mentioned your Instagram page. If anyone wants to find out more about you or contact you off the back of this, where can they do that?
It's the Instagram is at time.totalk_. that's the Instagram, or you can find my Instagram, just type in Lottie Leach and you'll see it in my bio. There's like links and stuff. Yeah, if you want to get in contact, yeah, just let me know and I'll be around.
Right, Lottie, thank you so much. That's absolute. That last hour and a half has absolutely flown in. That's
Yeah.
one of my.
That's been brilliant.
That's not to say anything about the other conversations. That's one of my favorite conversations I've
Yeah.
had all day. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice. Good luck. I hope you all don't fall asleep. Keep going.
Oh,
We'll try our best.
I feel boosted after that conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Like I feel,
Yeah.
we spoke earlier about how we anticipate sometimes after having really powerful conversations how they can leave you feeling like emotionally charged. And I think now more than ever since we started this thing today, I feel like that right now, emotionally charged, and it's from having such a powerful conversation with you. So thank you for joining us, and thanks for being so honest and just sharing your story with us. It's just been brilliant. Yeah.
Everyone's saying their thanks in the chat. Awesome.
Yeah.
Best of luck. Thanks, Lottie. And we've got a comment from Ben's mum who said, I've been dipping in and out today, but this was absolutely inspiring. So brilliant.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's so cute.
Right, Lottie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good luck.
With the rest of your degree as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Lottie,
Cheers, Lottie.
Speak soon. Bye. Bye-bye.